pleasure is really, really important. I think it's important in ways that we don't often think about or acknowledge. For me, pleasure is an equity issue. It's a justice issue, and it's an issue of life quality.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview thoughtful, inspiring, and influential guests who are creating their legacies and contributing to the greater good. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, psychotherapist and fellow Zestful Ager. And this podcast is my way of bringing some light into the world, which is feeling pretty dark and broken right now. Our music is courtesy of Judy Banker, a previous guest on Zestful Aging. You can find out more about Judy on her website, judybanker.com. Well, as always, I've got my little loyal Jack Russell Sparky right by my side, so let's begin. We have a wonderful interview for you today. We'll be speaking with Laura Zam, and she's the author of the best-selling book, The Pleasure Plan, One Woman's Search for Sexual Healing. She's also an award-winning health writer who's been featured in the New York Times, in Modern Love, Salon, HuffPost, and others. Her work explores the impact of trauma on our lives, and in particular, our sex lives. And as the child of a Holocaust survivor and a victim of sexual abuse herself, she uses her experiences to offer help and hope to the many people who are in need of healing. And an additional note, today would have been Anne Frank's 91st birthday. Laura just made me aware of that fact. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. So I wanted to start with a question, and it really is sort of forms the basis of so much of your work. It's simple. It is certainly complex, but I'm gonna let you have at it. And that's the question about why is pleasure so important?
Pleasure is really, really important. I think it's important in ways that we don't often think about or acknowledge. For me, pleasure is an equity issue. It's a justice issue, and it's an issue of life quality. So I'll talk about each of those briefly. It's an equity issue because in our society, some people are entitled to more pleasure than other people. I'll give you a non-sexual example. When I go to conferences, you can't see me, but I'm a very petite woman on the slim side and small bones, and I tend to be very, very chilly easily. And when I go to a conference, I am freezing in the ballroom. Always. Well, I've learned actually to wear many, many layers, and I never wear sandals because I learned. So conference ballrooms are designed for the temperature is designed to be perfect for a 200-pound guy who's wearing a wool suit. And so we think about the world. We don't think about how the world is actually designed to accommodate perhaps this 200-pound guy in the suit. And when it comes to sexual matters, we are also very oriented toward male pleasure. The whole construct of what we call sex is actually foreplay, warm-up, so to speak. This is heterosexual sex. Right? There's a warm-up of the, let's say, female partner so that the male partner can have his main event. right?
It's sort of preparatory, right? It's like sort of setting the stage for what needs to happen.
It's before. So so equity issue, because there are people in our population who are not valued. Their pleasure is not valued as much as someone else's pleasure. And it's baked into our norms, our society, all kinds of constructs. Justice issue is really something that I'm thinking about more and more. So when it comes to sexual trauma, we know that there are very high rates of childhood sexual abuse among people who are incarcerated. As just one example, there is a pipeline from childhood sexual abuse to mass incarceration. There are all kinds of justice issues that are very hidden from society, how abused people are, right? Or this kind of abuse can then turn into all kinds of different problems later in life. RAINN, which is the Rape and Incest, I always get it wrong. The Rape and Incest National Network, they've documented on their website all kinds of statistics about problems that can manifest for people who've been sexually abused in some way, assaulted, etc. So there are justice issues in terms of being able to have this kind of healing, to have access to healing so that it can circumvent later problems in life. And another justice issue, which to me flows into this quality of life issue, concerns my mom. You mentioned I'm the child of a Holocaust survivor. So when my mother was in the concentration camps, she was in 2 of them, they would have a practice of a morning count where the survivors would have to stand outside in a field with their arms up so that everyone could be counted. Well, there were thousands and thousands of prisoners, and the weather in Poland could be extremely cold in the winter, especially. And so the prisoners would have to keep their arms raised for hours on end, and if they put their arms down, they could very well be shot right there on the spot. So this is a form of torture, and I ask myself, what's the opposite of that? So we talk about social justice as an external from our body, societal kind of balance of the scales. But I think also internally for people who have suffered some kind of harm, what is the opposite end of that could help to heal? Because I think there is a kind of internal justice that happens, if I may use that term, that we need something that is really compensatory. And to me, on a very basic level, the opposite of horrible physical sensations, the opposite is great physical sensations. Yeah.
And just to make it really sort of simplified, when you're really hot and thirsty, it's cold water. Is you're looking for the balance, the opposite, to sort of neutralize that experience.
Correct. And if you're a little bit thirsty or you're a little bit hot, then maybe even room temperature water will work. But if you're very, very, very hot, then let's say you have a fever of 103, 104 degrees, you need extreme cold. So you need to go to that opposite end. You need to have a kind of extreme remedy. And pleasure is something that's beyond good. It's great sensation. So I think that it's important to acknowledge that that's really important.
You know, in all of my learning and studying and experience as a psychotherapist, I've never heard of healing constructed in this way, of recovery constructed in you need more pleasure. We are seeking out the opposite experience to neutralize the damage. Do you remember when you came upon this notion of pleasure being the stuff of healing?
I think that it actually goes back to this more elemental experience that you just touched upon with the hot water. I was living in Prague for some time in the 90s, and I had a boyfriend that I was living with, Aleš. And one day I had a cold, and Aleš said, "What do you do?" I got up to go to work because I'm an American, and that's what you do when you have a cold. And Aleš said, "What are you doing? You can't go to work." And I said, "Why not? I'll just take some cold medicine and I'll go to work." He said, "No. Here in Czech Republic, when you have a cold, you have to stay in bed for 3 days.
Oh.
Your employer, your boss, it will not let you go to work if you have not been in bed for 3 days." And I said, "Oh my God, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to stay in bed for 3 days." And he said, "Laura," he said, "in your language." Now, Aleš had a habit of knowing the English language better than I did. He said, "Laura, in your language, isn't it true that the word cold, the adjective, I am cold, is the same as the noun, to have a cold?" He got that technical. And I said, "Yeah, so what?" And I'm really annoyed. And he said, "Well, it's same in Czech. We have the same thing. Rima is cold, and mam rimu is I have a cold." He said this basically, he described the fact that there's a reason why we call this a cold. A cold means that the body is cold. And the remedy he taught me was you have to stay in bed, not just stay in bed, you have to stay in bed and you have to sweat for 3 days. 3 days of extreme heat is actually the cure for a cold. And this turned my mind around. And I think when I embarked upon this sexual healing project in 2011, it came back to me, this notion that, I have to find something that's going to be this opposite, and that's going to be also a missing piece of this whole equation. Because I didn't feel that I had ever been taught pleasure, that I had done a tremendous amount of healing with fantastic psychotherapists. I love therapy. I just went back into therapy. And I'd done such tremendous work with them, but it really was more based on psychological and emotional healing, not on the physical healing. And so I felt that I was missing this piece. I was missing this compensatory piece of being able to balance the harm that was done to my body. Another analogy I use sometimes is, let's say that I had, instead of sexual abuse, I had my knee had been damaged in some way by a bully when I was a child. And let's say that it had been rather damaged, rather harmed, that this person had taken, let's say, a hammer or something, horrible, and had smacked my knee. Well, later in life, I might have psychological and emotional issues related to that early abuse. I may be angry at my mother that she didn't protect me. I might be triggered if I saw someone who looked like the bully. I might feel a vulnerability that I might be attacked. But also, I might have problems with my knee. Mm-hmm. Physical problems with my knee, because that was the part of the body that was actually hurt. And I feel that this is a part of sexual healing that we miss. These body parts are actually harmed. They're carrying their own wounds. And pleasure is the way that we can, first of all, make sure it's a gauge of whether or not these parts of the body feel safe. It's kind of like a litmus test to figure out if these body parts feel safe. And then it's providing that, I guess going with the analogy of the heat, right? It's applying that heat, that compensatory heat that the body needs, that compensatory sensation.
You know what occurs to me too is that in order to agree with this this notion or this way of thinking, you have to get to the point where you're saying, I'm entitled to pleasure now. I'm entitled to being, my pleasure is important and I'm important. And I would say, and tell me how you think about this, because I know you're a certified trauma professional and you've thought about this in all different ways, but that in itself is a step forward in recovery. To be able to say, yes, I'm ready to allow pleasure. That's not a place I think that most people start as victims.
Yes, and I think that that's very, very interesting because, and you can tell me as a mental health professional if this is true in your own practice, but it seems like there are these early templates that get established for anyone with regard to our early childhood experiences. And if abuse has been part of one of those experiences, then that's a message that, okay, your body could be used, let's say, as an instrument for someone else's pleasure, and it's absolutely not, the integrity of your health and well-being is unimportant. So it seems that abuse does send that message, right? You're not important.
Absolutely.
Your life is not important. Your life is, you only exist to the extent that I can get pleasure from you, or that I can, right, that I can let out my aggression or my need for power.
It's the ultimate objectification.
Yeah, and I would even go further and say it's actually a form of dehumanization. I feel that we are obliterated in these kinds of situations. So I think that, that becomes part of a template that we carry forth. I'm not important, but my life is not important. It doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter whether I enjoy my life, whether I have any kind of happiness or joy or success or anything that we're all seeking in life. That could be wired in that this is not for us.
That's right. And then we can add different layers of race, of gender, of, there's all of these layers of where are we in the entitlement, on the entitlement question.
Yeah, and I've been thinking, going back to this, the pleasure as social justice or as justice, I'm thinking of all that's going on now with Black Lives Matter. And I was thinking about, okay, well, I think that we could even use our own pleasure activities and pleasure environments to help us to be aware of where we may be inhibiting our own pleasure, but also maybe where we are unaware that other people do not feel entitled to the same pleasures, or are not entitled, that society is not allowing them to enjoy the same pleasures. I was thinking of like a really lovely park, let's say, or a lovely school, right? That some people in their neighborhood, in their environment, this is bestowed upon them. Of course you could have a great place to have your children be educated. Of course you could have this lovely green space. But in other neighborhoods, it doesn't exist.
That's right. In fact, it's so interesting that you say that, because I'm a big fan of green spaces, forest bathing, and the science behind that. And it's so fascinating. You may be familiar with this, but when you take aerial photos, you can tell from above which are the areas of poverty and which are the areas of affluence based upon the density of green space.
Right. Oh, my goodness.
And we know green space is health promoting.
Yes, because it's health promoting on many, many levels. It also, as part of that health promotion, it provides pleasure. It provides all kinds of visual stimuli, aesthetic stimuli that bring us doses of joy, jolts of joy.
Yes.
Right?
That's so, yeah. Yep. It's so interesting. So, what I'm thinking about as well, and this is a little bit, it's sort of taking the lens and broadening it a bit, but my understanding and belief, and tell me if you think this is right. I think Oprah really started this awareness, is that there are many, many people who are not incarcerated, who never will be incarcerated, people all over that are walking around with the unhealed wounds of sexual abuse, because we know how rampant it is. And, you noted that in the beginning of our conversation. What does that mean for a culture, that there are so many people walking around, maybe never even having acknowledged this fact, but that's the way they interact with the world? How does that affect a culture?
Well, there are a lot of health challenges that are associated with any kind of abuse, child abuse, and particularly sexual abuse. So one way it affects a culture, I think, is that our healthcare system is actually inundated with people who've been abused and have health challenges that are related to it, and yet we're not really looking at the connection between the two. And so I think that there's all kinds of different hidden ways that the health of our society, our collective well-being, and the extent to which that's affecting our culture is affected by this in such an invisible way. I think that people who have been sexually abused are looking for healing in different kinds of ways, and that could show up in our culture as well. Some people move towards sex industries, people who've been abused. I don't think that everyone in sex industries has that history, but many people do, because they're looking for healing in some way. It's a form of empowerment for them. I know many survivors who made that choice in their lives. Someone who became a dominatrix, for instance, somebody who went on to become a stripper. And it's not uncommon because they then are in a position of power. They feel themselves in a position of power. So I think that our whole notion, or the way that sex permeates our society, is very much through the filter of sexual abuse survivors. Very, very much so. Marilyn Monroe was sexually abused from multiple men early in her life. And I'm not going to psychoanalyze her.
Well, that I did not know that,
Yes.
and now it makes me wonder how it was for her to be such a sex object, an icon of sexuality.
Exactly. So there is absolutely, I can say, is sitting on the couch, psychoanalyzing her, retroactively from decades and decades ago. But to me, there is a connection. But then she became this sex symbol, this iconic sex symbol. So she became a model for female sexuality. But it may very well have been informed by the fact that she was sexually abused and felt that she needed to. Again, we come back to this compensatory thing. Some survivors take that particular compensatory route, a kind of hypersexualization. Or it might have just been that, she was, of course, a beautiful woman. Society bestowed it upon her that she would be, every man's fantasy. And then she took that on with a connection of, connecting that to her early abuse, that, well, okay, this is what I'm good for.
This is what I'm here for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think our notions of what is sexy are very much come from survivors themselves, and choices they've made, and also their own healing that may take this form, or the way they've been manipulated in society.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. And I've shared with you in previous conversation about now when I do an intake interview, I ask about, have you had any experiences that were non-consensual? And I haven't, that was fairly recent, maybe 5-10 years ago in my career. But I was finding that when I was interviewing the college students or the grad students or whomever, that I could not ask that. It was so surprising to me how many of these students would say, well, yes, that was my first experience, or yes, a couple weeks ago I went to a frat party and there was alcohol involved, and it wasn't what I would wish for.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned there's a woman. Her name is Jane E. Boone, and she is a novelist. And I did a panel with her recently, and she called this. She coined a phenomenon that I was so taken with. She said, well, there are also these gray area sexual encounters. She called them, she said, it's not rape. It wasn't rape, but it wasn't right. That's what she said. It wasn't rape, but it wasn't right. And I just really love that phrase so much, because I think it captures these experiences that are in addition to what you documented on the intake, right? People saying, I know I had a non-consensual experience. And of course, we're talking about the prevalence of that, which is shocking, still shocking even after 2 years after Me Too, right? But on top of that, there are all these gray area encounters as well, which may not be on paper a non-consensual experience, but yet they may be imprinted on the body as trauma. And the body is not making that distinction. The mind is in turmoil, perhaps saying, well, I want to call it rape. I want to go out and, do something about this. I want to talk about it, or I want to, at least give it a label, because I feel so horrible. I feel so wounded. And so it would be easier if I could just give it a label and say that I was raped. But I don't feel like I can, because
it's so confusing.
It's confusing. So I think sometimes for people in that limbo, or in that area where they can't actually use that label, or feel that they can't, because of course everyone is free to, to categorize these experiences as they wish, especially if people felt coerced, let's say. That's something that we don't talk about enough. The coercion can take many forms. It could just be a kind of relentless pressure, right? And so then this person, the victim, may just give in and say, okay, fine, here, taking off my pants, fine, let's do it. And then that survivor may not feel like he or she or they can say, I was assaulted, because in the end they just said yes. They said yes, but they didn't feel that they really made this choice in an authentic way. They were just trying to get out of a situation. So I think those areas are also traumatic and extremely prevalent. I personally don't know any female who's not had at least one, if not more, of those experiences. It wasn't rape, but it wasn't right.
And I know that one of the hats that you wear, there are many of them, but that you've done a lot of presenting around college campuses pre-COVID, talking about sexuality. What have you discovered?
I found some really interesting things. Oh, you know what? Actually, I wanted to, Jane Boone has a book coming out, so I just wanted to mention it since I mentioned her. Her book is called, it's a novel. It's called Edge Play. Edge Play, and it's about a woman who is becomes a dominatrix as a form of power. So yeah, I think
we'll put that in the program.
Yes,
notes.
Put it in the program notes, please. Jane Boon, Boon, and it's called Edge Play.
Okay.
Yeah. So college campuses. What I found is the work that I do on college campuses. I've done prevention work. And I'm doing more and more work with survivors. There are increasingly peer groups that are started on campus that are survivors taking it upon themselves to provide services for other survivors because they feel that the campus is only offering two options if somebody does report a sexual assault. The two options are great options, but some survivors find that it's not enough. So the two options are counseling, which I'm sure you'll agree is a very, very good idea.
Sure.
Yeah, really, really important. And the other option is justice. So that if this person, there's a big question, right? Many universities would like to sweep this under the rug. They don't want the person to actually go through with a whole, with a whole case. But that's their big question, right? So they're like, okay, fine, let's see if we can get you into counseling. And also, big question, are you going to press charges? And if you are, what's the process going to be? So, but a lot of survivors, first of all, they may not feel that they want to go through a justice process. But whether or not they go through with that, they still are kind of left not having some basic sex ed that I think fits very nicely with further prevention for these survivors and on the campus generally. So I think that right now the way that we are talking about consent and providing consent education, it's great, right? It's great to have these tools out there and a consciousness around how we can prevent harming another person. That's fantastic. But from a sexual standpoint, it actually sets a really low bar for sexual encounters, because what it is saying is that if you don't get assaulted, then you've had a successful
oh, I see.
Sexual interlude.
See. That's all you need.
That's all you need. Mm-hmm. And I think that these young people are not getting this additional education. And here, this is again for like the good versus great. They're not getting that pleasure education. How can I turn these encounters into something that is not just I didn't get raped, right? It's like low bar. How can I expand upon that so that I can find pleasure? I can find a great sexual experience. I can find a great sexual experience because there is that equity issue. Why shouldn't I have as great an experience as the partner that I'm with, right? There's that justice issue. Maybe there's been some kind of attack in the past or a bad sexual experience, or it wasn't rape, but it wasn't right, something, so that pleasure could then help this person to find something compensatory that's going to be healing, that's going to help a development of their own agency, which is going to be big part of that healing. So I think that it's something that's missing from this equation. And the last time I talked right before the pandemic struck, I was doing a talk at Johns Hopkins, and I spoke to a group there, and I talked about this particularly. And one woman asked the question, and it was so striking to me. She said, but how do I ask for equal pleasure and feel like I don't have to apologize? Mm-hmm. And then I had conversations with these mostly women in this group, and they told me that it had never occurred to them
Right.
And these are very savvy women.
Right.
It had
And
never crossed their minds that they should identify what their own pleasure it is and that they should advocate for it when they are with a partner.
So it really ultimately, when we boil this down, it's about who has the power.
Yes. And power is I just touched upon, power is a huge part of that healing as well. We talked about the compensatory thing just in terms of sensation, but I think infused in that is power, is being able to advocate for oneself, to be able to identify desire and to act upon it. I think in many ways, desire is really the essence of power, right? It's saying, I want, right? I want. And then to take that into the next phase, I want, and I'm going to get it. That is power. That is what power is. That's all it is in many ways, right?
Just like this fundamental deservedness.
Yes. Deservedness, and then acting upon that and creating an experience and taking it all the way towards satisfaction. Sometimes I talk about something I call the arc of pleasure, which is, it has three parts. There's desire, there's process, and then there's satisfaction. Because the desire is for something often concrete, right? I want ice cream. Well, it's not enough to want ice cream, and it's not even enough to go to the store, although that could be its own form of pleasure. All of these are, right? All of these are parts of that pleasure arc. So it can be pleasurable to pick out the ice cream.
And anticipate it and look at all the flavors.
Yes.
And if you're like me, see what's on sale.
All of it. And scientists have shown there's more dopamine in the anticipation phase than there is in having the actual ice cream. But having the actual ice cream is critically important. That closes the loop. That's the end of the arc. So I think that when we talk about pleasure, we need to talk about all of these things. We need to talk about desire, being able to identify, to feel that deservedness, as you're talking about so powerfully and poignantly. The process, which is that agency, that's like pure power, getting it, right? Going to get it, whatever it is. And then being able to satisfy whatever that desire is, being able to see it all the way through.
I love that construct. It's just simple, but makes so much sense. And now I'm wondering, Laura, we have a lot of people from all over the world listening with very different experiences, but I suspect many of them are curious and feeling like they want to know what the first step might be in starting this process of what is it that I even desire? As your participants said, I am interested in this, but I don't know if I can do it without apologizing. What do you think would be the first step for people? And now we're talking with mostly not college students, but middle-aged women, mostly some post-middle-aged women. What is the first step to identifying one's desire?
Well, I think that I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle because of the population. So my work is about pleasure, but more broadly, it's about the road to pleasure. And the road to pleasure is, I call sexual healing. And that's how I define it, the road to sexual healing. So I think that when we talk about pleasure, the pursuit of pleasure, or the road to pleasure, we want to look at the impediments. what's blocking, what are the obstacles on that
Yes.
road or on that
Sure.
path.
What's getting in your way?
Exactly. Because I think that when there is no pleasure, that means that there's something going on. So I think that it's important, and that's kind of my niche as well, is to look at what are those problems, because those things can be very taboo to talk about. So with middle-aged women, I want to talk about menopause, if that's okay.
Of course.
I really want to dig in
It's
here.
mandatory.
So I want to talk about impediments that can arise in menopause or that can be concurrent with this particular age that a woman might be in. So there are a bunch of different impediments, and in terms of, I'll frame this though as what can a person do. So let's say that there is pleasure's not there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that what's important is to get some kind of really great professional to help one to find out find out about the impediment or the impediments. Because I think that this is difficult to do alone, and that it's great to have a fantastic therapist, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody like yourself who can talk openly and comfortably about sexuality, to be able to really, to tease out maybe what is going on. I think that that's something that's very important. For women in middle age, with menopause, let's say approaching or already having arrived, it's, I think, critically important to get a very good physical diagnosis, because all kinds of different syndromes and issues can arise because of menopausal issues.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2014, the National Menopause Society, American Menopause Society, along with another organization, they changed the designation of, we used to call this vaginal atrophy was what it was called if a woman started to have, or a person with a vagina started to have pain with intercourse.
Mm-hmm.
That was hormone related. So that designation was changed. It was called something, or it is now called something called GSM, genitourinary syndrome of menopause. So there are all kinds of issues, as I said, that could arise that are associated with this lack of estrogen and also testosterone, actually. But it's not known, it's not widely known. And so there might be problems, there might be genitourinary problems that are part of this impediment. So getting a good medical diagnosis is going to be really critical, because what I found and what the research has found is that a very small percentage of women are seeking out help and going on some kind of regimen to help with these kinds of symptoms. One study showed only 7% of women, menopausal, postmenopausal women, were seeking out some kind of remedy.
And what's your sense of providers who are literate in these kind of issues, these kind of menopause, postmenopause, perimenopause issues that you're describing? Do you have a sense that this is part of the training for GYNs and they're pretty literate, or not necessarily?
I think that most GYNs are somewhat literate, but there are definitely specialists. And I think that I found myself that it was very important to see a specialist. When I started my journey, my sexual healing journey, I started it with my gynecologist. And I told her, I had self-diagnosed myself. I'd had lifelong pelvic pain, painful sex, which is called technically dyspareunia. I had it for decades, since my first attempts at 17, I just thought I was broken. I had no way of understanding this. No doctor had ever diagnosed this issue, even though I'd seen many doctors and always had very, very fraught pelvic exams. So no doctor picked it up. And then I found a diagnosis of vaginismus just randomly online, which is a pelvic floor. The pelvic floor muscles are overly tight and weak. And so I self-diagnosed myself, and I mentioned it to my gynecologist, who was beloved by me. I adored her. I'd been seeing her for 10 years. I felt like an idiot going in and saying, by the way, I think I have this medical condition I never mentioned. Well, she was fine with the diagnosis, although when I started to ask her very specific questions about intercourse and why I might be having not just pain on entry, but different kinds of pain, she got very nervous. She was ill-equipped. She was ill-trained. She was not trained in sexuality. She didn't know. She actually gave me very bizarre advice. And, she gave me the wrong advice for treatment, and she gave me very bizarre information about intercourse, about how it works mechanically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then it took me 5 years being on this journey where I was seeking out all kinds of I saw 15 different kinds of practitioners, tried 30 different healing modalities. I was doing all of these things. And even so, it took me 5 years to even find out that there were gynecologists who specialized in pelvic pain.
Do they have a particular sort of license or something that one might look for, like, some letters of the alphabet that have certain credentialing, or is this something that you would find out by word of mouth, looking on their website? How does one find a GYN who can talk about sexuality?
Yeah, I'm going to give you 2 resources.
Great.
So one is, I mentioned, I called it the American Menopause Society. It's actually the North American Menopause Society.
Okay.
And their website is menopause.org.
Okay.
Yeah, menopause.org. And people who are specialists can become members of this organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the program notes. That sounds very important and helpful.
And so, they have, I believe they have find a provider. They have a database of of practitioners who specialize in menopause, and they have, I'm looking now, they have, not just in the United States, it says look by country. So it looks like this is international. And then I want to give you another international organization that's very, very important. It's called the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health.
Okay.
And this society is fantastic, and they also have a database where you can find a provider. And you can find a provider here. It's different kinds of practitioners, but they have had special training in women's sexual health.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can find that this is
the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So important.
Yeah.
That sounds so important as a first step. And I think that many people, you're going to pique their curiosity. Some people are further along in the journey, but I think some people are just beginning to wonder if it's possible to, get onto that arc of identifying their desire and then the process of going to get it.
Yeah, and I'd love to say something else about desire, because it is a big issue for women of this age particularly. And I think that I want to go back to the arc of pleasure. So I think that, and also equity issues. Mm-hmm. I think that what we call low libido can have a lot of different sources, let's say. It can be the result of a lot of different things. But I want to talk about some ways that it might manifest, or some reasons why people may have low libido that may not be commonly talked about. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes there's low libido because there's actually a lack of agency. I think that women are still, and especially women our age who have, were had moms who were born in the early 20th century. I think that we still, despite second wave, third wave, fourth wave feminism, that we still believe that our partner's pleasure is more important than our pleasure. Mm-hmm. And we still might believe that it is our duty to just kind of lie there and get it over with. And I think that sometimes low libido comes from a feeling of like, well, you know what, I'm done. I'm done just lying here and, I'm 50. I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to just lie there. I've got a voice and I'm going to say, honey, I'm done. I'm not going to do this for you anymore. So sometimes it actually comes from there. It comes from the quality of the sex is lacking. It can come because of this equity issue. It can come because, or not come, so to speak, because there's a lack of pleasure education. Because that concept of sex has always been, okay, my partner's gonna, warm me up, perhaps, and then we're gonna go to it, so that he can have an orgasm. And that may be something that this person may not feel that they have another way of framing things where they would have a lot more agency, where their own desire, here's that arc again, where their own desire would come into play, where they could actually redefine what that sex looks like. Mm-hmm. And this has a relationship as well with menopausal symptoms. Let's say there's starting to be pelvic pain. Well, if there's starting to be pain and your sex is organized exclusively around intercourse, well, of course it's going to seem very unappetizing. Right. And you're not going to be in the mood for it.
Right. Right. There's a couple things coming together at once. And I'm also thinking of this time now of this phase of development. And we talk about the gray divorce, where people are perhaps looking at their partners and saying, well, we raised our family and now what? Because I don't know, there's not much there. And I'm sure that can have an impact on sexual desire as well.
Most definitely, right? Because then if you're questioning your desire, do I have a desire for this person physically? Do I have a desire to stay in this partnership, right? So I think that there's a lot of questioning that can happen. But if the answer is yes, I have a desire to stay in this partnership, and yes, I do still have a desire for this partner, some desire somewhere, maybe it's hiding or small, but there is something there, some spark that still remains, then I think maybe looking at these other ways of framing sexual encounters that are going to have or call upon more agency, more sex education, more equality, many times that can really awaken or really get that spark to be, more sparky.
Oh, I love that. So, Laura, where can people find out more about you? This is such a fascinating topic, and there's so many sort of branches off it that are, it's so complex and so speaks to the human experience and so in such important ways. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
Well, the best place is just to visit my website, laurazam.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I have resources there. I just started a blog. And, of course, buying my book, because in the back of my book I've got, the story itself, which I hope is helpful for people, that they see that they're not alone and don't have to feel ashamed of their own sexual issues. But in the back of my book, I also have a lengthy appendix where I detail different resources. And in the book itself, I also, in each chapter, I have different exercises that people can do to reconnect with their own sense of pleasure and sexual health.
What a beautiful thing. Laura Zam, thank you so much. I know you and I could talk for probably 10 hours and just sort of have to stop for a snack and a pee break. That is what we would do. I love your work. It's so important, and I really appreciate your time this morning. I can't wait for people to hear this episode. And I wish you the best of luck with your book and all of the projects that you're working on.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait till the pandemic is over and I'll come up to Syracuse and we can have a long...
In the green spaces. We'll find some green spaces.
I can't wait.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Laura.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends. I love to hear from my listeners. Send me an email at NicoleChristina.com. It's no secret that everyone's feeling pretty restless and unsettled right now. Our lives are upside down and the future is feeling pretty uncertain. But if you're anything like me, organizing my stuff can help me feel a little calmer. It's something I can do to help me feel a little more in control and in charge of my own life. If you think decluttering could help you feel better and you could use a little assistance with that, check out the online course I've developed with professional organizer and designer Carrie Luderin. It's called Too Much Stuff. And Too Much Stuff is different from other courses or articles or guidance you may have used up. We give you clear steps to deal with the clutter and the tools to help you face the overwhelming feelings and the emotions that come up when we're going through our clutter. And a lot of those emotions are just feeling anxious or guilty or just basically flooded with a lot of different confusing feelings. The course is really practical. It's realistic. The lessons are short and punchy, and they're really manageable. We're not trying to set you up for some long exploratory, super in-depth, burdensome experience. We want something really helpful for you right now. We all need help with our anxiety. So being surrounded by more calm and less chaos can really help. So now's a good time to clear out the clutter so we can focus on what's really important in our lives. So find out more at zestfulaging.com. You'll see more about this under the web courses tab. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email at zestfulaging@gmail.com. Thanks so much. And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest.